Happy Friday, everyone, and right now enjoy the calmness because in about the next 24 to 48 hours, it's going to be a total mess here across much of central Minnesota and majority of Minnesota as a whole, as we're going to have a pretty strong winter storm system come through. Some of your typical winter storm system includes rain, ice, snow, basically what we'd expect for this time of the year and in winter right now, or rather spring, not winter. We're out of winter, but it's basically what we'd expect for our common systems here across Minnesota for spring. So right now our system's currently sitting over parts of Nevada, northern Arizona into Utah, and it'll eventually work its way out through Colorado, up into Nebraska, and then really get its act together as it heads into parts of Iowa and South Dakota, and then into Minnesota. So in regards of what we're looking at here in just overall timing and precipitation wise, this is from the NAM 3K, which is a computer guidance model. It's 3 kilometer is part basically just the resolution, so it has a little finer resolution, picks up a little better details. This overall model decently does a good job in terms of forecasting. It does have a couple bias where it usually will end up showing a little bit more precipitation that actually falls. So that is one of the issues that is fairly common with this model. So just keep this in mind that this isn't exactly what's going to happen. It's just one potential model, but it does give you a decent idea of what we can expect in terms of this snow system. So this picks up as 8 a.m. this morning, so about 5 hours ago. And we'll see that there's a initial system that comes through across northern Minnesota. This is not part of our system that we'll see for our day on Saturday. This is a totally separate system. It brings a little bit of snow, a good chunk of some freezing rain though across northern Minnesota, even a little bit of rain showers. And as this system departs out of here through the overnight hours, we could even see a few showers and thunderstorms pop up. Some severe weather is not out of the question. I'll get into that in just a little bit of exactly where we could see some severe weather and what the hazard would be. But a few thunderstorms are possible, mainly across that southern Minnesota area, but maybe even central Minnesota might pick up a few of those. But majority of the system will stay well to our north, bringing some snow to parts of Canada, even northern Minnesota along the Iron Range, North Shore, and then a little icing down towards Duluth. And that system will be out of here pretty quickly. And then as we head into our day tomorrow, this right now is at 2 o'clock for our day tomorrow. So we see a little bit of ice and rain starting to work its way through parts of central and southern Minnesota. And our main system is still in parts of Nebraska and South Dakota. That will continue to really get its act together quite quickly as it starts to work its way into Minnesota. And by about 5 o'clock on our day on Saturday, we already have widespread rain across southern Minnesota, including the Twin Cities metro. Then as you head up towards the St. Cloud area, you will notice that there's a fair bit of ice showing up in terms of what we can expect for radar presentation. And unfortunately, I think ice is going to be a pretty big issue here. The National Weather Service will show what they're looking at, but I think that we're going to end up seeing more than what their maps are showing just based off what most of these models are showing. And as this system does continue to progress through, we'll see much of southern Minnesota is going to stay with rain as those temperatures really aren't going to drop. But across northern Minnesota, we are going to get a fair bit of dynamic cooling, which basically just cools the atmosphere, at least up in the atmosphere, and that will allow for those hydrometeors to change from rain or over from freezing rain. And then eventually, as we head into our evening hours around midnight, 1 a.m. on Sunday, it's going to basically turn almost all to snow, at least across majority of central Minnesota. And it could be a fairly heavy swath of snow, especially where we get that changeover from rain to snow. Usually we see a fairly significant and heavy band of snow. Not always the biggest band of snow, but it usually is fairly heavy. And I would expect some decent snowfall, at least accumulating snow, to fall wherever we do see that change and right along it. And there should be a fairly decent swath of snow, probably about 50 miles or so wide, of where we will end up seeing some sort of accumulating snowfall. This system will continue to push its way on to off to the north, northeast. This is 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. Still snowing across much of Minnesota, but we do know some heavier snow up across northern Minnesota into northwestern Wisconsin. So if you're going to be out there traveling, just know that early morning Saturday or more early morning Sunday and continue through much of Sunday will be fairly snowy. And by the time we head to about noon, 1 o'clock, things should be mostly cleared up here across majority of central Minnesota. Maybe a few wraparound scattered snow showers, but the bulk of the damage will have already been dealt by that point across majority of Minnesota. And by the time we head into the evening hours on Sunday. Everything should be mostly cleared out of there, not expecting any sort more precipitation for the rest of our day, and we'll have at least a couple days of relief before we will see another storm system work through. So in terms of what we can see in terms of rainfall, well, it's going to be a good chunk of precipitation just in terms of overall. If you were to have everything be melted down, right around an inch or more across a good chunk of Minnesota, which is very nice because we do need this rain. We are already in a little bit of a drought, and this summer might be another one of those drought-stricken summers like we've seen over the last couple of years. If we don't get this rain, and we're still well below average in terms of where we should be for snowfall and overall precipitation for this time of year. So we'll basically take almost any sort of precip that we can get right now, and hopefully that will help ease conditions as we head into our summer time, and hopefully we see more precipitation than we have over the last couple summers. So in terms of what we can expect for severe weather, it's be just for a day today. Tomorrow we might get a couple of scattered thunderstorms. They'll be non-severe just because we won't have any energy for them to work with, and it would be across southern Minnesota in terms of if we get some tomorrow. But for today, it'd be later on this evening. This is a marginal 1 out of 5 risk here. Does include the Twin Cities metro, not quite the St. Cloud area, but we could still see a thunderstorm, maybe even a strong thunderstorm, not out of the question. But the biggest risk here is going to be for hail, just because these storms will be elevated. There's a little bit of wind shear to keep those hailstones up in the air, bounce them around a little bit until they do get heavy enough to fall down, but not looking like a super big threat in terms of severe weather. And I don't think it's going to materialize very much, but I think that a few thunderstorms are likely to pop up somewhere across southern Minnesota as we head into the evening hours today, or rather tonight. But anyway, as we head into our day on Saturday, initially things will start off as rain, and then it's going to turn to some ice. So in terms of ice, the National Weather Service has us right around 1/10 of an inch. I think that we might very well see a good chunk more than that, and they also might shift this down a little farther down to their south. This rain is going to fall. It's going to turn to freezing rain as it falls, just due to a layer of cold air, most likely, that will be setting up, and also things are going to cool off. So any rain that hits the ground beforehand and melts is most likely going to freeze by the time we end up getting snow. So really any sort of precip that falls and melts is really not going to do us any good, because it's going to leave a pretty thick layer of ice on the surface, make a good chunk of our surfaces almost like an ice rink, and then it's going to cover it with snow as we head through the overnight hours. So in terms of what the models are looking at, we'll run through a couple of the models here. So the model name will be up here. So this is the NAM 12 kilometer. It's the same thing as the 3 kilometer, just less resolution. So it doesn't pick up as many fine details, but once again, still gives you an idea. And I think it's a little outlandish to say that we're going to see almost an inch of ice across southern Minnesota. It does not seem plausible to see that much. Even anything more than a half inch really doesn't seem very likely at all, unless some crazy situation would happen. But I think somewhere between 1/10 to maybe even 1/4 of an inch looks very possible across this corridor, basically stretching from the St. Cloud region to about the Twin Cities metro. That looks like a very good corridor for freezing rain. The NAM 3K showing a very similar thing, just north of the Twin Cities metro, right around 1/4 of an inch, maybe even up to 3/10 of an inch of ice here. GFS, which is the American model, also shows right around at most 3/10 of an inch or so here, but does still show at least 1/10 of an inch here in the St. Cloud area, and a little more closer to 1/4 of an inch for the Twin Cities metro. And then finally, we'll finish off with the HRRR, which is a short-range rapid refresh model. And this one shows very much less of that. Shows a lot more rain in terms of, if you were to actually look at this model, it shows a lot more rain and not as much snow either. So it tends to run a little bit warmer here with this system, which is a very possible outcome, but it shows somewhere right around 1/10 of an inch or so for the St. Cloud area, and it keeps the Twin Cities metro mostly out of that ice. So overall, what we can expect out of this in terms of ice, I think at least 1/10 of an inch, if not 1/4 of an inch, is definitely not out of the question for snowfall or for ice, and it's going to really make things very slippery, especially because the fact by the time you go to sleep, things are going to be basically almost all liquid at that point, and you're going to wake up and you're going to have a thick layer of ice from freezing rain plus anything that froze over, and then you're going to have a layer of snow on top of that, and it's just going to be treacherous out there, really not what you're going to want to be out. If possible, try to avoid going outside, especially early on our day on Sunday. And then as we head later on with this system, things will transition over to snow. Now this map from the National Weather Service basically really shows the story of it's going to really depend on how quickly we can get this rain to change over to snow. Basically, if we can get it really quickly, it's going to be, it honestly might be for better, because we're going to see less ice if we can get it to change quickly, and then we might see a little more snow, but snow is manageable. Ice, not as much. So for St. Cloud, they say somewhere 5 inches max, less than that, very likely. And then as you head up farther towards northern Minnesota, more likely to see more snow, and obviously southern Minnesota less than that, because we're expecting a lot more rain. So what are the models showing? Obviously, to keep it very transparent, the models are all over the place with this system in terms of snowfall. Ice, they've gotten it fairly close in terms of location-wise. Model or mounts still vary, but the snowfall ranges are kind of all over the place. So this model, one of the rapid refresh models, shorter range models, shows almost 7 to 8 inches of snowfall across central Minnesota. I'm not totally convinced that this is going to be the case. I think that this is overdoing it. This model also tends into us switching from rain to ice to snow very, very quickly. So this would be probably one of the high-end overall solutions that we could see if things do transfer over quickly, but you'll see it's probably one of the more outlierish kind of models. This is the NAM, which showed a little bit more ice, and it also means that would probably take a little for us to switch over from rain to snow, but it still does show somewhere about 1 to 3 inches, maybe even 4 inches of snow across central Minnesota. And then the European model, it's a little bit of a wider range model, so not great detail, but it still does show a swath of about 2 to 3 inches of snow. It also does push it a little farther south, which makes this one a little bit of an outlier, because almost all the other models have it where this initial band is about 2 or 3 inches. But I don't think that parts of the Twin Cities metro, or at least southward of that, are really going to see snow, if any accumulation with it. But onto the American model, this one also shows a little less of an ice solution, and a little bit more snow. Honestly, the GFS shows almost the worst case scenario, where we'd see almost a 1/4 of an inch to 3/10 of an inch of ice, and then tack on an additional 4 to 7 inches of snow, and just a disaster of a mess it would be out there for your day on Sunday. And it would take probably a majority of Sunday to clean things up, and even then it still might be pretty icy out there in a good ice rink for probably until Monday morning, if this were to be the case. And if that's the case, if we get that much ice, then we might need to start looking at possibilities of too much ice on power lines and trees, and things start falling down, and that's when things basically can go from not good in general to much, much worse. So just something to keep your eye out if we do end up getting a fair bit of ice. That might be an issue that we might have to deal with. Just be ready for any sort of power outages if it does happen. Have water, food, flashlights, all that kind of things. Just have them handy, and just know it will be cold out. So obviously, hopefully you didn't put your winter clothes away yet, or jackets, but if you do have power out for an extended period of time, could be a little chilly. Obviously, heat would get turned off, so just make sure we're bundled up and staying warm out there. But overall, kind of the key points. So this storm system is going to run through Saturday afternoon to the evening, sometime about 3 to 5 o'clock, starting across the majority of central Minnesota. And it'll run through Sunday late morning hours through the early afternoon. The exact track will kind of vary depending on how fast the system moves, but sometime around the later morning hours on Sunday, things should be starting to clear out of here. We're going to initially start with rain, then we're going to head over to ice and snow across central Minnesota. Southern Minnesota will stick to just rain, but depending on how fast we can change from ice to snow is going to determine how much ice we do get, and obviously the more ice we get, the less snow we'll probably also get, but also the more dangerous will also be out there. So accumulation in terms of ice, somewhere between about 1/10 of an inch to maybe 3/10 of an inch of ice on the high end. Obviously, if things really happen and we cannot get below that freezing mark, it is possible that we do see more than that. I don't think it will happen, but still obviously not out of the question of something that is possible with these systems, as they're very, very hard to predict when will flip over. But accumulating snow on the backside of that, as that temperature drops below freezing, and we'll see probably somewhere between 1 to 4 inches here in St. Cloud. Once again, also depending on how fast things flip over. And then, unfortunately, as we head through this system, the rest of the weekend will remain dry. Monday, fine. Tuesday afternoon and evening, and then into Wednesday, we see yet another strong storm system, very similar to this. Very uncertain with the track. It looks like almost it would be basically over central Minnesota somewhere, at least Minnesota as a whole. We should see a good chunk of this storm system. Another icing potential, another rain potential, and then unfortunately another heavy snow potential. So obviously way too far out to show anything with it. It's not going to be probably till Sunday or Monday till models really start getting a grasp of it, but it does look like we're in for yet another pretty hefty winter storm system, and then hopefully should be the last one for at least a couple days where we can catch a break and recover and get all cleaned up from these last two storm systems. So I'll have probably another video tomorrow morning if need be, if something super crazy changes, maybe a live stream, I don't know. But regardless, stay safe, check road conditions if you're going to be outside, try to limit your travel as much as you can this weekend. It's going to be very, very messy out there, especially late Saturday through Sunday. Try to stay off the roads. They're going to be very icy. Obviously, I know I've already seen a fair bit of work done by the snow plows and putting all that pre-treat on the roads, trying to limit how much of an impact this ice is going to be, but there's just some things you really can't do in terms of trying to prevent all this ice. So stay safe. If you have any sort of questions, feel free to reach out. I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, have a good rest of your Friday and a good weekend.